Hey everyone, as we wrap up the module 3 discussion, I just had a few reactions that I wanted to share. But before that, I just wanted to remind you about the midterm exam. It's in there, it's in the syllabus, but there's three attempts. So I'll just keep the highest score, and it's also open book. And it all comes from the Glading text. So just know that that's uh, kind of the basic details about the exam, and it covers all of the information from modules 1 through 4. And then this week, in module 4, you'll be able to start viewing the theoretical um, demonstrations. So the videos of the same family couple is going to be used for all these different demonstrations. So I think it's kind of a unique opportunity to be able to see how these different theorists apply their work to this same couple family, or excuse me, family client. So I strongly recommend viewing that to be able to kind of make sense of what these different theories can look like in practice. All right, so a few reactions from the discussion board. So overall, great work. And I think it's as is normal with ethical scenarios. There's no clear right answer in most cases. Uh, so I felt like you all kind of engaged in that gray area. Sure, there weren't tons of details and background about the cases, but I felt like you were able to kind of, for the most part, kind of pull out important ethical codes to be considering. So I just wanted to speak to the importance of ethical decision-making models. So some of you referenced specific models. Others kind of went through the codes and talked about what you do and answered the questions for the discussion board, which was completely fine. But I just really want to strongly encourage you uh, to use ethical decision-making models in your practice. So when you feel like there's kind of this gray area where you're kind of stumped on something, because that will happen, to go through a clear process, especially if you're like, okay, there could be some legal risk with whatever decision I come to. So going through the codes, writing and documenting what you're doing, consulting, those are some standard principles that are part of most ethical decision making models, but it's important to choose a specific model and go through the steps. Uh, and one thing that I kind of wanted to highlight that for the most part, everyone did pretty well in the discussion board in your original posts was to get specific, get into the codes. And it's kind of an interpretive act to go into the ethical codes and make sense of, what, how the ethical codes apply to the scenario. And people might read things a little bit differently, but that's, once again, it's important to go into the ethical codes, get specific, and then kind of zoom back out after you've made your decision to be able to say, okay, now that I've come to a conclusion, how does my decision apply to the meta ethical principles? So of autonomy, fidelity, non-maleficence, beneficence, etc. So I think that kind of that zooming in to get specific, then zooming out to kind of see how the decision we landed on applies to those core kind of foundational principles is important. I wanted to speak to the ACA Code of Ethics really quick on Section H. So that's on the distance and technology, as well as technology in general. So if you didn't look much into that section, I would strongly encourage you to look into Section H because of, I'm kind of referencing the case of the teen client who was basically advocating to say, no, I don't want to be there in person. I want to use technology. So that's why this code or this section of the ACA Code of Ethics came up. But I just feel like this one's really relevant post, kind of as we're, from COVID on, it's become way more normal to use the distance technologies for counseling work. So yeah, look into that section. I anticipate that this section is going to be bolstered and updated in the near future. So the AC Code of Ethics is nearly 10 years old. It came out in 2014. So excuse me. So I think we're going to see some I don't know if dramatic shifts is the right way to say it, but I imagine that section is going to be thought out in even more depth in the near future. All right, so I did want to address the case study 3 just really quick. So about the case where uh, the family was your client, and then they're going through a divorce, and the wife was wanting to consider, you know, the drinking of the husband, etc. So uh, I just wanted to normalize, and some of you got to this conclusion, others didn't, but it's okay to not have a clear answer ultimately. Like we don't have to have every answer about what's best for the client, or what's like, especially about custody. Like in ultimately, like if you're not evaluating the family for custody reasons, you're just seeing them as a family client. You might have some opinions, but ultimately like, your role wasn't to evaluate for custody reasons. So a court could ask us for our opinions, but you know, and maybe they'd push this a little bit, this thought that I'm about to share, but ultimately, like I would probably say something like, honest, like my role wasn't to evaluate for custody. So I feel like I'm not an expert in navigating custody, arrangements. Of making choices about how the family dissolves after divorce. That wasn't my role. My role is to work with this family client to work through their challenges. So it almost seems like an avoidance of the answer, but it's honestly probably the most honest answer that I would feel if I was in that case of saying, uh, I might have opinions about what's best, but that's not my role in a legal situation to say that opinion, because I wasn't acting in the role, uh, you know, for custody or the dissolution of the family and how that plays out. So just something to chew on. I know a few of you kind of started to wrestle with that of saying, okay, what is our role ultimately when working with the family, and does that then kind of play into what we disclose or what we don't disclose, and just kind of say that wasn't my role. I can't really address, certain issues for legal purposes if that wasn't my clear role. Uh, so I think it's important to look at both the IAMFC Code of Ethics as well as the ACA Code of Ethics. And some of you did that, which I thought was really helpful. Some of you just chose one, which was okay too. But I think B13 of the Marriage and Family Counselor Code of Ethics and B4B from the ACA Code of Ethics is kind of an interesting example of how having two different codes come together can be important. So B13, I'll just read it really quick or pull it up. So B13 basically addresses how, in situations involving multiple clients, couple and family counselors provide only the records directly related to a particular individual, protecting confidential information related to any other client. Then B4B from the Code of Ethics, the ACA Code of Ethics, basically addresses how, are you seeing it's couples and family counseling. So if the client isn't clearly, defined as one individual, then by default, it's basically that the couple or the family is considered the client. So these two codes coming together, I think, can be a good example of kind of seeing, like, so if with one individual of the family after you've been working with them requests records, according to B13 of the Marriage and Family Counselor Code of Ethics, we can't really release information about other individuals. The we'd have to have consent from all parties. The whole family would have to consent to that record being released. And I think it also gets to, like, how do you document family counseling sessions? Do you keep a note for each individual in the family? Do you keep a note just for the whole family as a client? So I think that's going to come, something to be thoughtful of. Me personally, from what I did with a couple clients, was I didn't write two separate notes. I wrote one note for the family. So that would be interesting if they then came back and wanted to request the documents, because then I could just say, I can only release the portion of the notes that relate to just you as an individual, according to my ethical, requirements, unless both individuals of the couple signed, a consent to release the information. So I believe this came up in like one or two posts, but I just wanted to highlight it more generally, because I think it gets into the nuances of, like, I think we really have to be thoughtful of kind of with not to like increase anxiety, but just being pretty precise about why are we choosing to document in a certain way? Why are we choosing to see the family as a couple, or excuse me, as a client rather than each individual? I think this once again speaks to that important paradigm shift in couple and family work of how we view the client. So anyways, a court could kind of push back and maybe say, no, you have to release the full record. But according to our ethical requirements, if both parties in a couple or all individuals of the family haven't consented to release the information, then, it just says we can only release the portion that's the person who's requesting the information. So I guess in case study 3, just the wife, we could only release information related to the wife's experience. We couldn't speak to the husband. Obviously the court could push back, the judge could mandate certain things, and we'd have to navigate that with an attorney and with consultation. But just as the code reads, I think it's important to recognize that. Okay. this was kind of a small thing, but in the case of the teen who was refusing to participate or stating, a refusal to participate in person but wanting to be online, some of you referenced that teenager as a female, some of you as a male, and I'll just, state that there is actually no indication of gender there. So just an interesting thing that I wanted to throw out there of kind of recognizing assumptions or of kind of how we might naturally kind of view from our lens the client, so obviously in the case of like working with the family, you would have more information of their gender identity, but just something interesting to think about. Okay, I guess just a couple last thoughts. So as it relates to consultation, some of you referenced how you'd want to consult, you want to seek out supervision. I think that's absolutely important and appropriate and needed when addressing ethical situations. At the same time, though, others can, when you seek out consultation, those will provide ideas. A supervisor, if you're working under their license, they might be a bit more directive of saying, hey, here's what I need you to do. And once again, you're working under their license. So that's important to acknowledge and consider. But if you're just consulting someone and it's not, just to kind of get ideas from them, it's ultimately not their responsibility of providing the correct answer. So consultation might kind of provide another lens, but ultimately it's on your shoulders to make the call, to make the judgment call of how to respond and how to act based in that ethical situation. So I just say that because it almost seems like some are like maybe anxious about making the call of what to do in these kind of gray area situations. So they might want to outsource that to, okay, the consultant told me to do this, so I'll do that. But you still need to be the one to back up your decision, and others might disagree with what the consultation says. Like a judge might disagree with it. So I just wanted to kind of, I guess, encourage you to own the final decision and recognize that it's on your shoulders. In most cases, once you're fully licensed and you're working on your own license and not someone else's. But I think that's an important acknowledgement at this point, even in your counseling program, still to recognize that there is a weight to this profession. And I think we need to be able to, shoulder that weight and be able to say, here's the decision I made and here's why. Here's the codes that back up what I'm doing. And, here's how I've documented the process that I went through to come to this conclusion. And if someone pushes back on it, then you said, I made the best decision that I could. And here's why. I have it written down. So yeah, those are the main thoughts that I have, and I appreciate the discussions. I might give a few specific feedbacks when I grade on Monday. I'll try to get started with the grading for the discussion boards. I might have a few more thoughts for you individually, but those are some of the general thoughts. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need anything.